So we had three breakout questions on the table. What was the thesis of the reading? Two, what was your contemporary analysis of the reading? And then finally, would you be able to apply Ma'at to your personal life? Who would like to start us off?
I can. So I think the thesis of the reading for part two was just discussing about like the Declaration of Innocence and how those like basically like it would be like in the situation of a person pleading their case of how like they live their life strictly according to the Ma'at principles and how they can't be accused of living a life that was immoral or not righteous if those statements in the Declaration of Innocence um like apply to them.
Perfect. Thank you. Who else like to add to that?
I'll go. Um, the thesis of the text, in my opinion, was talking about the rules and like the guidelines that people should follow. They're talking about people that are not wrong. And I have not done wrong to people. I have not impoverished my family or friends. They're basically saying that they haven't done anything wrong to people that they care about, people that are important to them. And then could I apply my in my personal life? As someone who is somewhat religious, I would say yes and no, because I feel like my is an important principle to follow. But me personally, I'm not sure of how I would use my specifically, but I would understand why people do nowadays and back then, of course. And that's it.
Can I ask you, Nina, based off your religious principles or whatever your
Yeah.
personal religion is, do you feel that practicing your religious that you practice and the actions and the principles of Ma'at are in conflict?
I feel like they're a bit similar, but also very different because of the different rules and like the different principles that we preach and the principles that Ma'at preaches.
Do you mind sharing what your, just for my curiosity, what your religious
Buddhist.
Buddhism? Okay, cool. Thank you. Who else would like to share?
I'll go. It's kind of like basically saying like how pure and innocent he is, because it's kind of like juxtapating like the real not kind of it's kind of like he's saying like how his like how innocent he is compared to like some like mm, I don't want to be like very disrespectful to other religions. Ugh. But it's kind of like saying how like he's the most purest like person in the entire world, and how if people like made up lies about him, he's like that's not true, because he's listing basically like pleading his case about how pure he is. And if people were to tell him that he's wrong, he's not, because he hasn't done anything.
And I'll further kind of crystallize like who is he and what's taking place as it pertains to the Declaration of Innocence in the lecture. But good call out though. And give me two more and we'll call it a day. Actually, not. We'll move on. How can you apply Ma'at to our world today? How can we apply Ma'at to our contemporary world? Or can we?
Yeah, you can.
Oh,
Ma'at is a practice of good, so whether you're religious or not, I feel like you can apply it to your daily life.
I would agree. Thank you, man. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Well, let's reverse engineer it then. Who feels Ma'at could not be applied in our contemporary world today? And if so, why not? So everyone agrees that Ma'at can be applied. correct? Okay. So then if that's the case, how would you apply it to your personal life? Thinking about the third question, how would you apply Ma'at? Go ahead, Ernesto.
So for me, at least because I'm not too religious, like for me at least, I believe in, my religion and such sort, but you won't see me, go every single Sunday. So the way I see Ma is like, in my point of view at least, I see it as like you don't have to follow everyone else like way of believing in the same religion, some sort, and you can actually just live out your life being able to say, okay, I'm a part of this religion or this belief, and do your own thing. So that's the way I at least can connect my to my life. I'm not too sure exactly how to put it into words, but that's the best way I could say it.
Well, thank you. Anyone else?
I guess I can apply Ma'at to my life, although I am agnostic. Um, I can definitely like say I've done most of these like things that he said that he has not done. So I have not done a lot of like the things that he's said. So it's kind of like, for example, like I have not done what is harmful to people. Like I haven't like purposely like hurt someone. If I accidentally like did were to hurt someone, I'd apologize for it and make it up to them. Um, and obviously, like it's kind of like like not like a list of rules, but like a list of like things that you shouldn't be doing and like have like good morality because you want to have good morality in this world.
Perfect. Anyone else? Get one more and we'll move on to the lecture. How could you apply Ma'at in your personal life?
I'll go. Um, One way I feel that we can apply Mahat to our personal lives is just being like a respectful and optimistic person to like everyone we meet every day, and we should always like focus on like presenting ourselves in a cheerful way to make others feel better. And I just feel like that's the main idea and goal of Mahat is just to like live in harmony with others.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle, because as I was listening to you, I was thinking about the teachers of Ptahhotep and kind of what the thesis of that text was. And you brought the two readings together very seamlessly. So I think that was a good place to end it. Give me one second. I want to pull something up for us because I want to kind of show you a depiction of Ma'at and the confessions of Ma'at. So. Let me share my screen real quick. So if we look at this image here, let me try zoom in. Can you all see this here, where my cursor is? Okay, so this is kind of the setting of Ma'at and how Ma'at comes into play in the Kemetic folklore. So if you can see my cursor, you see the individual here being led by the Anbis, and then you'll see in front of him is the scale, right? And if you'll notice on that scale is this individual's heart, and then the feather of Ma'at. Here you have Tahuti or Thoth taking record of what's being stated. And then you have Asar or Asar sitting on the throne with Ma'at behind him. So what's going to take place is this individual here, who is just recently transitioned, right, is tasked to state those declarations of innocence. I have not harmed someone. I have not stolen, right? And while they make those confessions, the scale is weighing the individual's heart versus the feather of Ma'at. And if they're able to state those confessions truthfully, right, then their heart will be as light as the feather, and they'll be able to successfully transition into the afterlife. if in the fact that they're not able to state those confessions truthfully, then this individual here, the jackal, will be the one who will take that individual to, you know, what the Christians may call hell, but they didn't really believe in the concept of hell. But you just would not be able to successfully enjoy the fruits of the afterlife. Kevin?
So it's basically like whenever you say these, the feather will be heavier than your heart, and it will like lift like your heart up higher. But if you lie, it'll like sink down a little bit.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And the goal is, right, like you may not have all 42 confessions, right? But you may have 40 or 35, but you're still able to state these things truthfully, and you're still able to say these things with a light heart. So that will still allow you to, you know, go on to the afterlife. So it's not like it has to be 42 out of 42. But overall, right, you're a good person. You treated people well. But what I want to kind of want you all to think about, right? And we'll tease this out doing a comparative. So when you hear the word temporal, what comes to mind? What do you think temporal means?
Temporal lobe.
Okay. Not quite. Other thoughts on temporal? So in this case, when we say temporal, that means time, okay? In the space of time, past, present, future, right? So thinking about the declarations of innocence from a temporal standpoint, they state what? I have not. So thinking about that temporally, are we dealing with the past, the present, or the future?
The past.
Correct. Now, let's do the contrast. We'll use the 10 Commandments, for example, right? How are the 10 Commandments phrased?
In the future, right?
Bing. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay.
But what's the phrasing, though? So that way, for those who have not caught it, they understand how we got to the notion that it's in the future. What does it say in the Bible as it pertains to the 10 Commandments? How is it articulated?
Is it kind of like you will, or is it like
Thou shalt not.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right? That's the commandments. Thou shalt not kill, right? But you're correct in the sense that they're a future reference, right? Because it's telling you what you better not do, okay? So within this temporal assessment, you can realize that ma'at is about how you have lived your life. These are the things that you've already done. I have not killed anybody while I was living. I have not hurt anybody while I was living, right? These are the things that you've done in your life in the past, because you're now in the afterlife, right? The commandments are about what you better not do while living, okay? So you see the difference in how they are framed from a temporal standpoint. One's dealing with the past, one's dealing with the future. What is the benefit of having someone focus on their past actions juxtaposed to them focusing on their future actions? What's the benefit of that as it pertains to how people will act within society? Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, Eric, and then we'll go to Kevin. It's cool.
oh, okay. I was gonna say, I think maybe like when it's concerned with the past, there's time to change or time to improve rather than like with the future, you have to plan out your actions and there's less room for like improvement, I would say, because you're already aware of how you're supposed to act. But when it's concerned with the past, you're able to change how you were. If you were a bad person in the past, you're able to, I guess, improve that, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Okay. What are you going to offer, Kevin?
I was gonna agree with that because in the past it's like, well, you already done it. Now it's time to get better. And in the future, it's like you're kind of like in that like state of fear where it's like, oh my God, I better not do this, I better not do that, I better not do this. And you live your life constantly in fear. While in the past, you've already done it. Now improve.
So, okay. You're both right, but let me kind of iron this one point out. You have to understand with Ma'at, right? You're stating these things, you're dead, right? You made your transition. So it's really not about going back to improve. You can't, right? Like I've lived my life. I'm in the afterlife now. This is what I've done, right? Whereas the commandments, and I believe Kevin said it correctly in the sense that it's really driven out of fear, right? Thou shalt not, because if you do this, you're going to hell, right? So this is why this is a future tense thing and a fear-based future tense commandment, correct? Whereas with the declarations, you're declaring what you've done in life. It's already happened, right? I can't fix it, but all I can do now is speak truthfully about what I've done, right? But here's where the move comes in the sense of how they shape society. Now, if I know at one point in my life, I'm going to have to stand before my eye and speak truthfully, and I cannot lie because they're going to read through my bullshit, you're going to move and you're going to behave in a way that's going to allow you to speak truthfully at your day of judgment because you know what's coming. That's one thing that we all know, right? We all know, we could all agree on, there's no debating, we're going to have a time where we'll transition. We will not be in this physical capacity forever, right? No one could disagree with that. So with that being the case, if we all understand that, then you know once you make that transition, you will be judged by Ma'at. And one thing that you cannot do to Ma'at is lie. Because that's the first principle of Ma'at, it's truth, right? So you're going to ensure that your behavior is in a way in which you could go before Ma'at and speak truthfully, right? And this is why this temporal essence of Ma'at is foundationally important, right? This is why I wanted to draw a clear line of distinction between how the commandments from a future standpoint are really rooted in fear, right? But whereas Ma'at, from a past tense standpoint, is more rooted in the knowledge of you know you'll be judged. And it's not fear-based because if you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to be good. But if you don't, that's on you because you knew better, right? And so I want to kind of be able to draw this line of distinction between how these two spiritual practices, if you will, are thinking about the ways to shape human behavior. Right? One being fear-based and one really being about accountability, right? Okay. I'm going to jump into the more of the third portion of the reading that's talking about Ma'at ontology, okay? And I want to, so when you hear this term ontology, this is the branch of philosophy that deals with how you understand who you are, okay? Ontology could be closely related to what's called positionality, right? Has anybody heard of the term positionality? No. So for myself, right, my positionality is I'm a male, right? I'm Black, I'm African, right? I grew up in a middle-class home, right? So I have a middle-class upbringing. These are all identity formations that make me who I am, right? I grew up on the West Coast, right? So these are all parts of my positionality, which also speak to what's called intersectionality, right? And how intersectionality could be understood, right? So for me, male, right? So from a standpoint of sex, I'm on the dominant end of that standpoint, right? Because we live in a patriarchal society where it's understood, although falsely, that men occupy more power. And again, I want to overstate falsely. This is a false notion, right? This is the world that we live in, okay? But at the same time, I'm Black, right? And in an anti-Black society, in a racially stratified society, I operate at the bottom rung of this positionality, right? So my intersection is I'm a man, so that puts me on the access to power, but then I'm a Black man, which puts me on the lower aspect of power, right? Another wrinkle that you could throw on there is I'm a heterosexual Black man, right? So in this heterosexual normative society, that's deemed as normative, right? So that's a part of my intersectionality, right? So juxtaposed to an African woman, right, who is oppressed because A, she's a woman, and then oppressed B because she's Black, right? And then let's say that she's a same gender loving woman, that adds another layer of oppression on her because of this heteronormative society, right? So her intersection offers her 3 layers of oppression. Does that make sense? So now you see how this notion of intersection how your multiple modes of identity intersect and how they deal with these various modes of oppression. But this informs what's called your positionality, your position in the world, and how you're able to see and view and understand social phenomenon based on your position, right? So, for example, someone with my racial position as Black, right? They're going to look at the Trayvon Martin situation a lot differently, typically, than someone who occupies a white body, right? Because of their positionality, because of their intersection, okay? So when you're talking about ontology, this is the branch of philosophy that deals with how individuals understand who they are. On the second page, actually, we'll go to the first page. So Kua is an author that the Karenga, who is the author of this text, is citing. Says Kua argues that one of the main tasks of moral theory is critical attention to moral metaphysics. Now, metaphysics is anything that goes beyond the physical, right? So this phone is a physical entity. If we're talking about metaphysical, that could be like spiritual matter, that could be energy, right? Because these are things that exist, but they're not seen. So this is what he means by metaphysics. Comparing this concept to Kant's, so Kant is a philosopher, metaphysics of moral, which is meant to investigate the idea and principles of pure will. He suggests a task of investigating the metaphysical presuppositions of a moral tradition. He thus defines moral metaphysics as an inquiry into the underlying conception of a moral tradition in terms of its worldview or vision of the relation between the world of human affairs and the natural order, right? So why he's concerned with metaphysics is concerning with how human affairs are shaped by, how the moral idea shapes human affairs, right? So what is moral, what is immoral is going to determine how you act. And this is the metaphysical concern of the author, right? Second paragraph, he states that Ma'at is first of all an ontological conception, but its ethical implications loom just as large on the ancient Egyptian intellectual horizon, right? So one, Ma'at is about understanding yourself, first and foremost, right? And this is why I asked you, can Ma'at be applied in your personal world, right? And I would argue for everyone it can, right? So when you interact with someone, are you interacting in a way that's truthful, that's harmonious, that's in balance, that's in order, that's reciprocity in the sense that what you would do for them, they would do for you? Is it propitious in the sense that what you want for them, they want for you? You want the good for them, just like you want the good for them, just like you want the good for yourself, right? This is propriety. So in those capacities, in your social interactions, are you able to behave in that capacity, right? Is your moral standard going to be based on the principles of truth, justice, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity, propriety, right? So this is the way that we as a society can act in a way that's ma'atic, right? My household is structured in a way that's ma'atic, right? So one of the things that no matter what happens, my children, I implore that they don't lie, right? Tell me the truth and we'll deal with it as it is, right? But when you start to lie, not only are you eroding my trust in you, you're not performing in a way that's ma'atic, right? Is the way that my son is interacting with my daughter, is that producing harmony in the household? If not, you're not performing in a way that's ma'atic, right? Is the way that things are set up in the home, is it done in a space of order, right? If not, then it's not in order, it's not ma'atic, my house is not in a ma'atic state, right? In the relations between me and my wife, is it balanced, right? Am I sharing majority of the responsibility and she's just chilling, or is she responding the majority of the responsibility and I'm just chilling? That's out of balance, so that's not ma'atic, right? So these are the ways that Ma'at shapes our ontological being, our understandings of ourselves, right? Because I don't want myself to be out of order, so I don't want my household to be out of order. I don't want my children to be out of order, because those are all reflections of my ontology, of how I understand myself to be. And this begins to create the moral codes for how we as a family operate. Okay. In fact, it is ontological and ethical meanings are interrelated and must be studied as such. So it's saying that the ontology, just like I stated, right? The ontologies and the ethics, they go hand in hand. And when you're studying Ma'at, you must look at these two things interchangeably. You can't separate the ontology from the ethics. The ontology informs the ethics. Indeed, central to the understanding of the ground of ethics and related critical questions is comprehension of their ontological foundations. As Tillich has argued, the roots of the moral imperative, the criteria of its validity, the source of its content, the forces of its realizations, all this can be elaborated only in terms of an analysis of man's being and universal being. So in other words, like strip away all the big words, right? Fuck all that shit. That's going to get you confused. Really what he's saying is about how man, how individuals, how human beings, right, are relating to the universal, to the universe. And that should be structured within this moral code, right? But again, it's not divorced from your ontology, how you understand yourself to be, right? Do I understand myself to be someone who is supposed to conquer nature, right? So if I understand myself to be someone who is supposed to conquer nature, then I don't care about how many trees are in the forest. I'm gonna cut the motherfuckers down because I need my shopping mall, because I'm meant to conquer nature, right? So you see how your ontology and your moral standards now begin to impact how you relate to the universal or to the universe, right? These things are interrelated. If we think back to last week's lecture, and it talks about the elasticity of Ma'at, right? And the various domains of Ma'at. This is still what they're talking about. But what they have done is added this notion of ontology into the conversation to make us understand that our interpersonal is important. You can't separate the interpersonal. Karenga continues on the second page. The essential concern here, then, is not with equating ethics and ontology or simply defining qualities of being, but rather demonstrating the moral significance of these qualities in the ethical thought and practice of the ancient Kemetics. For, in the final analysis, the ancient Kemetics' fundamental, even prior, ethical concern is not ontological, but experiential and practical, i.e., concerns with defining the living good life. Ethical concerns is not ontological, but experiential and practical, i.e., concerns with defining living the good life, of being a worthy member of family and community, and of creating and sustaining the just and good, i.e., Ma'at society. So again, we could play up here in the realm of theory, right, and think about these ontological and ethical concerns with the Ma'at, which is there, right? But then there's also the very practical matter. Very practical. Living a good life, being a worthy member of family and community, and creating and sustaining the good. That's really at its core. Strip away all the big terms and all the philosophy. That's what Ma'at is about. Living a good life. Again, think back to last week, right? The teacher of Ptah Hotep, and I believe which was the 11th wisdom teaching. Do no more than is what is required to take care of your family. What Ma'at is saying too. Strip it down, make it practical, right? How can you live a good life? How can you situate your family? How could you situate your community? You do those things and you're taking care of what Ma'at is asking you to take care of. So how does something so simple, far as like what we're looking out of life, right? How does that get eroded? How does that get misplaced? How many of you all are just okay with living a good, simple life? Or let me rephrase that. How many of y'all are going to school to live a good, simple life? That's your reason for going to school. Kyle, you are? So how does it translate? What do you want to get your degree in?
I want to get my degree in finance and law
Okay. So how will
because, like,
finance law, how would that allow you to live a good, simple life?
it'll allow me to live a good and easy life because I'll be able to provide for myself and my family because this sort of job will be more high paying than other jobs that I can get without a college degree. That is why I'm going to college.
Okay. Who else raised their hand and said they're going to school for a good, simple life? Fabian, so if it all, what's your degree, first of all? What do you want your degree in? Start there.
Currently, um I'm studying in business, and I won my degree in business because most of the world actually revolves around business, and you could get some good paying jobs. Or let me yeah, you could get some good paying jobs without a degree, but um, you're more likely to get a really well paying job if you have a degree for business. So that's why I feel like if I put in the extra time and hours, then in the end it'll pay off.
Okay. Who else? Going to school for a good, simple life. Go ahead, Jay. What is your degree?
So basically, for me personally, I want to say that going to school, I have it as like more of like a cushion, sort of. So personally, for me, my degree is in business, and I'm doing it for marketing, so like business and marketing. But I want to be a business owner. You know, I want to be like a entrepreneur, business owner, someone that has like something that grows, and it's usually difficult when it comes to that. And when it comes to that, you need to have like experience and more experience as in a personal level, more than just like a school level. Like you go to school and experience it. It's more like you have to like be out there and like kind of hustle a little bit. So I just feel like personally for school, it's more of a cushion for me to get more knowledge and like understand maybe from different perspectives and understand from like a more of a school-based knowledge type of perspective, just to understand each side of it, you know, just to help me out a little bit more. So I want to say that's mainly my reason for it.
Okay. I noticed that the three people we spoke to at some capacity are dealing with business and finances. If I'm listening closely, I would argue that why you're all going to school is for a job. And you're thinking that that job is your conduit to a good, simple life. Am I wrong? So for those who did not raise your hand, so for example, Amanda, you didn't raise your hand. Why are you going to school?
To learn.
To learn? What are you trying to learn?
My major is criminal justice, so more about that. It interests me.
So once you get all the information about criminal justice, what do you plan to do with it?
I want to work for the FBI, hopefully, in the future. I want to help people.
Okay. Working for the FBI and helping people, that's an interesting dichotomy to me. If you know what the Federal Bureau of Investigation does, it rarely helps, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I think even with Amanda, right, she's like, I want to learn. But her desire to learn is tied to what? An occupation. You see where I'm going with this? So y'all, even though you tell yourself all these different stories, you're all here for a job. Either way you slice it. And I'm gonna drop a secret on you. Them jobs ain't gonna give you no secret, simple life. I'm sorry. Being a business entrepreneur is fucking hard and far from simple. Chances are for you to even excel in business entrepreneurship, you're gonna fail first. That's part of the process, right? That's not gonna be easy and simple. Let's just say your business excels, right? What does that mean? That means more hours for you. It's not simple, right? So even if the shit goes the way you want it to, you're working more. It's not simple, right? So in juxtaposition, right? I have a cousin. He lives in Mid-City. I want to say since he was 18, he worked at the time for the Staples Center, right? Still works for the Staples Center. He's 35 now. Still works for the Staples Center, but on his part-time, he does dog grooming, right? Neither of these occupations are prestigious, but I'll tell you this about him. He's happy. His needs are met. He lives a good, simple life. And it dawned on me driving home from LA yesterday after visiting with him, like, he got shit figured out. He's not stressing about anything. His needs are met. It's simple. I'm gonna go collect some tickets at Crypto Center for a little bit. I'm gonna go cut some dog's hair for a little bit. I'm gonna set my schedule how I so choose. And that's it. I'm good. That's all I need. And he's happy. So I just want you to understand that job attainment does not equate to happiness. The task of these jobs are to extract the life out of you. Start to study business efficiency. Study that for those who want to go into business. Study how business efficiency works. What that is about is the moment that you punch in to the moment that you punch out, every millisecond belongs to that organization. That's being efficient. That's an efficient worker. But what that does to the worker is stresses you the fuck out. You're not a machine. Your body's not built to work at that capacity. But the powers that be want to make sure that you're efficient so that way you produce the most amount of production with the least amount of pay. So I'm not going to pay you overtime, right? But your ass better clock in on time. Efficiency, right? How long you been on your break? You need to get back on the floor, right? Efficiency. So begin to think about why we have been socialized and trained to believe that jobs will give us the simple life. Why is that? My parents are, my mom's been retired for a year now. My pops will retire on the 28th of this month. Been working their whole lives, right? Did very well for themselves. Like, I grew up middle class, but my brothers below me, they grew up upper class. Them motherfuckers was on by the time my brothers were getting older, right? Very well for themselves. But they're having to come to the realization that the life that they're accustomed to from working, they won't be able to maintain on a fixed income, right? So they did all these years of work, thinking that once they're done, they'll be able to enjoy life, right? But now it's like, oh, well, the money is not going to be what it is, so we have to live life differently. But we're not trained to think about these things. We're trained to think about working until we die. Shit, that's what we're trained to do. That's not the simple life, because it don't have to be like that. There's other ways to avoid this matrix. All right, we'll transition to the fishbowl. You could talk about the breakout questions. You could read from your journal. You could talk about what was discussed in lecture. You have one time to pass. You have to do 2 per semester. Actually, no, that's the other class. Melanie, you have already used your pass. So just so you know. Is there anyone who would like to volunteer for the fishbowl? Okay, Eric and Anthony. And Jay and Fabian. All right. Is there any women who would like to fishbowl just for some gender balance? No? All right. We have Eric, Anthony, Jay, and Fabian. Who would like to start us off?
I don't mind starting. So I think for one of the ones I wanted to touch on was from part 3 of the PDF from the MAAT PDF. So on page 177, there was a quote that said the first basic motif of MAAT ontology is the potentiality and power of being. And I think this quote expresses how much power and potential is like associated with just like our existence. And I believe this is where the relationship between ontology, ethics, and Ma'at is like truly identified, because this is why the ancient Egyptians were so concerned with their actions and made it a priority to live in a righteous and moral manner. Um, because ancient Egyptians were aware of how living a moral life could lead you to receiving like so much more wealth and positivity, both while you're alive and like also in the afterlife as well.
Good call out. And also, Eric, just based off of your interpretation, right? I could tell you're doing a close read, right? It's one thing to like skim it, but based off how you were able to break it down and produce an analysis, that's a very close and attentive read. And I think you're spot on. Thank you. Who's next?
Thank you.
I'll go next.
Okay.
So I just wanted to talk about, based on what you said about, sorry, I forget. Did you say it was your cousin, right?
Yeah.
You said it was, yeah, yeah. So I wanted to talk about how you said he was your cousin, and like how he still does those things, but he still lives a good life. And I just thought it was interesting because it is true. Like, it doesn't really matter what you do. Like, let's say job pertaining, like even if you was to work from like a 9 to 5 or whatever you want to do, or even if you didn't work at all, it more matters about like how you view the world on a personal scale and how you can see it in your own eyes to like be happy and, you know, do your own thing and do the schedule that you want to do. Because at the end of the day, it's not based on like how much money you make or based on how much you could really change on, like, you know, a job. Like, let's say you want to go from like an employee to a manager, you know, to the whatever you want to do. It's based on like how you basically view your life. Because you can say you can have $1 million. Let's say you have $1 million today, and you could still be the most unhappy person, while someone who has $0 may have a more, even just more fulfilling life than you do. But you know, you may have like a social status, or you may have a extra large bank account, whatever it is. It's based on your experience and how you see the world from a perspective of your own, based on, I don't know how to explain it into good words, but it's morally based on how you deal with things morally. Basically, basically with your cousin, like he's living a good fulfilled life. Doesn't matter if he had like a good amount of money or whatever job he's doing. It's based on how good he feels to live his own life. I feel like it's just more like, when it comes to living your own life, it's how you make it in your own view and perspective. I feel like that's for everything. Like, what I believe in, it's always just like perspective of everything. But yeah.
Very true. Jay, is that a Upland High School shirt?
Yeah, this one I thrifted it, so I don't have any, like, you know, no knowledge behind it, but yeah.
No worries. We have Anthony and Fabian. Who's next?
I'll go. So I want to do the breakout question number 3, if I could apply my personal life. And I think I can, since I live like very cautiously, and like I really think about things before doing. And I feel like Ma'at is just like a guiding principle. I feel like it promotes like just having like ethical behavior, right? And like and it shows like a sense of balance. Well, you're supposed to show a sense of balance like in your relationships, decisions, and like actions.
And I think, Anthony, the act of thinking about things before you do things helps you to minimize harm, right? If you sit back and think about what I'm about to do, how will this impact everyone who I care about, that allows you to be a little bit more attentive and empathetic to people's situations. So I think you're absolutely right about that. Fabian?
I agree with Anthony. Looking at part 2 of the reading of Ma, page 144 to 145, and then 146 and 147. It's I'm looking at it, and it's showing me here that Mahat basically teaches you to be better. It really wants you to make, yeah, like he said, make balance in your life, and to do no harm to anybody or yourself. And I thought it was really interesting. And then how you were talking about using Mahat in the current day. It's new to, this is all new to me, so it's good to learn a new term, Mahat, and how it's still currently being used to this day. Yeah.
Thank you, Fabian. Abigail, is your hand up for the fishbowl, or you just had a comment or a question?
It's for the fishbowl.
I got you. Give me 1 second. Let me write your name down. Okay, and you can go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, so I would like to talk about the declarations of innocence and compare it to something my religion has, which is the 10, I think the 10 commandments, and how different they are, but kind of similar in a way. As in the 10 commandments, I'm pretty sure the first one and the second one talks about how you should put God first and how you should follow only him. Whereas in the Declaration of Innocence talks about how you should be better as a person instead of putting their God first, and how your morals should be more important than what you follow. And I think that's really interesting because I'm sure we all know that Christians and Christianity is used a lot in politics, and how we should perceive and follow rules, which I think is just awful, especially in jury trials and stuff. So reading this made me realize how blind most of us have been in accepting the way we see things and do things. And it makes me realize how different these two things are.
Let me ask you this, Abigail. What does it make you think to know that Ma'at came first? How does that inform your thinking on it, on the differences?
Sorry, can you clarify that more a
Yeah,
bit, please?
so like Ma'at, the writings of Ma'at, the Declarations of Independence, right? They predate Christianity and the writing of the Bible, right? So we can't say with any great confidence that the 10 commandments come before the 42 declarations of Ma'at, right? Like the 42 declarations of Ma'at came before the 10 commandments. So I'm hearing you do a contrast or a comparative between Ma'at and the 10 commandments. How does knowing that the Ma'at came before the 10 commandments inform your imperative or your comparative, excuse me?
Oh, it says a lot about self-respect and how Christians view God as something more powerful than they view themselves. And with Ma, you can clearly see that his morals were more important than he was himself at times.
Okay. Her morals, and because God, Ma'at is understood as a woman, but what I'm asking, right?
Sorry.
Like historically, Ma'at comes before Christianity. Ma'at comes before the Bible. The Declarations of Innocence come before the 10 Commandments, right?
Mm-hmm.
As someone who is comparing the differences between Ma'at and the 10 Commandments, what does the information that states that the Ma'at came first, how does that inform the way you're thinking about the differences between the two? Put it this way. Let me put it to you this way. If someone told you that the so-called Christians went into the temples of Kemet and stole Ma'at and made the 10 Commandments, how would that make you feel about the 10 Commandments?
I wouldn't know whether to follow it or not anymore. Like, I don't know if it's real to believe.
Okay. And my purpose is not to make you not follow the 10 Commandments, right? But one, like if we're doing these comparatives, because I think what you're doing is important, and that's why I'm spending so much time with it. Okay. If we're doing these type of comparatives, one of the fundamental aspects of a comparative is to establish who comes first, which one predates the other, right? And then once you understand the origin of something, right, then you kind of start to think about why would they make the changes that are being made, right? What's the benefit of talking about not worshiping false gods opposed to talking about your moral character? Who does that serve and who does that benefit, right? So think about it this way. If I have an idea to colonize someone, right? If I have an idea to enslave someone, it would work effectively to say, you better not worship any other gods that are false, right? That's the first thing I command you not to do is worship any other gods. So African people had different gods before Europeans came over to Africa. Indigenous people here in the Americas had different gods before the Pilgrims came and Columbus came over to the Americas, right? So this idea and this notion of false gods become important because what they're really saying, any god other than this European God that you know Jesus to look like, right, is false. It's an idol. It's idol worship, right? And
Yes.
because of this, we could go out and begin to colonize the world to make them believe in the cross. And this is why, to understand the origins of something and to be able to see the differences between the origins become important. Because the original version, right, they're not saying only worship Ma'at. They're saying be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely correct in picking up on that. But then the question should become, why make the changes? And I'm arguing that those changes are made to further subjugate and colonize people. Just like you said, politics use religion, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The project of modernity used Christianity to further subjugate people of culture. It's just what it is. We'll get to last minute comments before we call it a day. 2 comments, we'll call it a day. You volunteer, or I could just call on you, preferably someone we have not heard from. Marlene, what are you thinking? Or feeling?
I guess my take on the lecture, everything that we heard today, is that I guess while applying MAAT to your life, you have to think, you have to be emotional, but you have to apply logic into it. Like you can implement it in your own certain way, but it's not like every single person's gonna have the same way of implementing it based on a religion, I guess.
And I would say, right, you're absolutely correct, but at the same time, what that is balance, right? Because you don't want to be over emotional, but you don't want to be over intellectual. You have to be able to find that middle ground. So that's a great call out. Thank you. We have not heard from Yahara. What are you thinking or feeling? Yahara Castillo, what are you thinking or feeling?
Sorry, can I pass for today?
That's not really a pass, it's just a question. So you have to be thinking or feeling something. You sat with us for an hour and 15 minutes. Nothing resonated to you?
I don't have I don't know what to say.
So again, this whole time you sat through lecture, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to have nothing to offer to the class if you're paying attention. So were you thinking or even feeling? Again, I'm not asking you to be overly intellectual, but you can offer what you're feeling as well.
No, sorry, just
Did you do the reading?
no.
Okay. Did you sit in the breakout groups?
Mm-hmm.
So there was nothing mentioned in the breakout group that caught your attention?
No.
Okay. So what I'm gonna need from you for you to be successful in this class is A, your attention and focus, right? Part of our agreements coming into this course was everyone was going to show their utmost intellectual capacity, right? And being present intellectually is part of our requirements for this space. So on Wednesday, we'll start class off with you offering something about the reading. Jay, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask real quick. So do you think that the teachings of Ma'at conflict the 10 Commandments, basically? or do you want to say that they are basically combating off each other? Or what do you think?
I don't think it's a conflict. I just think that the 10 Commandments were used to do something different. And they were concerned with not more so creating a good being or creating a good society, but commanding people on how to behave, right? Not necessarily for the greater good of the society, but just to course correct behavior. And with that being the intention, that could be used for very dubious purposes. Enslavement, colonialism, things of that nature. So I don't think within itself is bad, but the way that it was used becomes problematic. I think that's the difference. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So for next week, real quick before we let y'all go, bear with me. Let me get this pulled up. We are reading Patrice Maldoma Somé of Water and Spirit. We will discuss the first portion on Wednesday. So please come prepared to discuss that portion on Wednesday, just the first one. And then next week on Monday, we'll discuss section 2. If no one has any further questions,